ReviewTyme is the home for all things theme parks. Stay up to date with our videos by subscribing and tapping the bell icon. Disneyland truly is the happiest place on Earth, and in its over 60-year history, plenty of bizarre, crazy, and downright hilarious stories have happened. From live alligators escaping the Jungle Cruise, to the unknown kidnapping of a president, and even the cats that once called Sleeping Beauty Castle their home. So let's take a walk around Disneyland and explore some of my favorite stories of the park from cast members, guests, and more. For ReviewTyme, I'm Luke, and this is some secret stories of Disneyland. For more secrets and stories, be sure to check out the book collection by Jim Corcus. Of course, your day in the happiest place on Earth starts on Main Street, USA. And as you walk under the train station, Walt's dream is unveiled to you. But our first story actually involves the station itself and its distinctive turn-of-the-century clock tower. After opening day in July of 1955, one of the most consistent guest complaints was that the clock tower on Main Street Station constantly showed the wrong time, to which a diligent maintenance staff member would go up, reset the clock, only for the complaint to continue later the same day. After several attempts with this same result, management set about to see where the problem lied. They observed the maintenance cast member go about his standard procedure of calling the park's telephone operator for the correct time before resetting the clock. Further investigation by management saw them stationed next to that phone operator in City Hall. When she received the call from maintenance for the current correct time, she would look out the window of her office at the massive Main Street Station clock and tell him the time she saw. After discovering this, the problem was quickly rectified. Adventureland is home to Walt Disney's true-life adventure films and all of your childhood dreams of exploring far-off worlds. Since opening day, the Jungle Cruise has welcomed guests aboard a boat ride through the world's greatest waterways. But Walt always regretted the fact he had to use animatronics instead of living animals. Walt's insistence on live animals did kind of come to fruition not long after opening, when Walt organized for a small, fenced-in pond of alligators viewable from the Jungle Cruise queue. One of the first ever Jungle Cruise skippers had this to say of the addition: "We'd have to catch the baby alligators that we had there because they'd climb over the fence and get out." Let's just say the alligators didn't last for too long in Adventureland, as most guests' idea of an exciting adventure isn't being snapped at by escaped baby alligators. One of the quintessential shots of Disneyland is the Mark Twain riverboat circling the rivers of America. However, if you rode the boat on opening day, you might have been swimming in the rivers instead. On July 17, 1955, Terry O'Brien was given a clicker and told the Mark Twain could hold 200 to 300 guests. However, clicking eventually got boring, and he began talking to the guests instead of clicking. Before he knew it, 508 guests had found their way onto the Twain, which, shall we say, struggled to make the loop. Pretty soon, the emergency toot of the horn was sounded to signal that the boat had sunk off the track and into the mud. After a slow process to re-rail the vessel, it slowly chugged back to port before it tipped into the water again, making guests wade through the rivers of America to get back safely on dry land. Pirates of the Caribbean is one of the quintessential Disney rides, and to this day, some people would still call it the best Disney dark ride, thanks in no small part to the wide variety of animatronic pirates who call the ride home. The wonderfully detailed costumes for the pirates were created by the incredibly talented Alice Davis. When creating them, she wanted to make an emergency backup set of costumes, but the president of WED at the time said it was much too expensive. Alice didn't take no for an answer though, and simply ordered twice as much material as she needed, made a second set, and told accounting each costume would cost twice what it actually did. This rebellious behavior actually benefited the company immensely after a fire broke out in the attraction's fake burning town scene finale not long after it opened. Many of the animatronics costumes were either destroyed by fire or damaged by the ride's sprinkler system. When the president of WED rushed to see Alice and ask her how long the brand new, incredibly popular ride would have to be down for new costumes to be made, she simply replied, "Half an hour." Walked over to a cabinet and opened it to show the complete, ready, second set of costumes. Pirates reopened the very next day. We finally found our way to the heart of Disneyland. Fantasyland is of course home to all of the characters of Walt's fantastical films, and anchoring the land is none other than the park's major weenie, Sleeping Beauty Castle. From the beginning, Walt wanted something inside the castle, but for budgetary reasons this had to be cut from opening day plans for the park. And shortly after it finished construction, the second story of the castle became home to hundreds of feral cats who had lived on the land before Disney took over. Eventually, after the park opened, Walt wanted a walk-through attraction within the castle and decided to climb up the ladder to check out the second floor, along with Imagineers Ken Anderson and Emil Curie, all three of whom were unaware of the cat situation and were all wearing pristine white suits. Before too long, a mysterious-looking bag was picked up, and instantly the three white suits of the men turned to grey, as they were covered with thousands and thousands of crawling fleas. The three men ran through the park from the castle to wardrobe, where they were dressed in spaceman costumes whilst their clothes got washed. Today, the roughly 200 feral cats who live at the park are much better looked after, and even fed at 4 permanent feeding stations throughout the resort. With the surprise popularity of 1988's film Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Michael Eisner wanted to bring the character and story into the parks as soon as possible. Whilst many things were planned and ultimately cancelled, the one surviving Roger Rabbit attraction calls Toontown home. When Imagineers were designing Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin, they wanted to do something new and creative, and the perfect solution was a hybrid ride that combined the best of Disney's Fantasyland dark rides and the classic teacups. One night, Imagineers took a teacup, slapped it on a Pinocchio's Daring Journey ride vehicle, went through the attraction, and the rest, as they say, is history. On the 14th of June 1959, Vice President Richard Nixon was unknowingly kidnapped by Walt Disney and famed Imagineer Bob Gurr. Nixon and his family were at the park to dedicate the brand new monorail. However, it was a hot day, so Walt invited Nixon and his family into the pilot's cabin to cool down in the AC. Walt, wanting to show off his big new toy, decided to take Nixon for a ride with the father of the monorail, Bob Gurr, at the helm. This was all well and good, except they failed to inform the Secret Service detail who was serving on the station. As the monorail completed its first lap, slowing down to stop at the station, Nixon's 2 daughters shouted to go again, once again leaving the agents behind, and completing the first ever successful 2 consecutive laps of the monorail. Luckily, Nixon greatly enjoyed himself and laughed off the kidnapping when approached by the Secret Service detail once they finally did unload at the station. course, Disney's newest land isn't without its own stories, which I'm sure we will talk about eventually, but to protect my sources from now, I'll give you a nice little in-universe reference in the land, proving that absolutely everything is themed. When tossing out your trash at Galaxy's Edge, make particular notice of the sector number where all of your garbage is sent. Sector 3263827 is home to none other than the Death Star's trash compactor, where Luke, Leia, and Han found themselves stuck in A New Hope. I'd hate to be the person who has to somehow get this trash delivered to a destroyed space station. And that brings us to the end of our exploration of Disneyland through some of my favorite stories. Sorry, Critter Country, I couldn't find anything quite interesting enough about you. But do you have any favorite stories from the history of Disneyland? We'd love to hear about them in the comments section. For Review Time, I'm Luke. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing.